In 1961, a steel worker in Ohio dug a hole in his backyard, lined it with cinder blocks, and stocked it with gear that cost him less than $40. When the blizzard of 1978 knocked out the grid for 9 days, his family was the only one on the street with hot food and warm light. Number 14 on this list was sitting in that shelter. Most people think prepping means a basement stacked with batteries and freeze-dried pouches. The truth is older and smarter than that. Number 7 was standard in every American home 100 years ago. And number 3 can keep you alive when every gadget you own turns into a useless brick. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten doomsday survival tools every prepper must have. Number 25, the crystal radio set. Before batteries, before charging cables, before the word off-grid existed, a kid could build a radio that needed no power at all. A coil of copper wire, a chunk of galena crystal, a long antenna strung across the attic, and a single earphone. That was the whole machine. It pulled the energy to run itself straight out of the radio waves passing through the air. In the 1920s, families built these from kits that cost about $1 or from scrap they already owned. Here is why a prepper should care. When the grid is down and the cell towers are dead, information is survival. A crystal set has nothing to drain, nothing to short out, and nothing an electromagnetic pulse can fry. Soldiers in prison camps built secret foxhole radios from razor blades and pencil lead to hear the news. No power source on Earth is more reliable than no power source at all. Number 24, the kerosene hurricane lantern. When the lights go out for good, the people who panic are the ones who only own things that plug in. Your great-grandfather lit his entire house with a steel lantern that cost about 50 cents in 1935 and would burn for nearly 2 days on a single fill. The glass globe protected the flame from wind, which is how it earned the name. A gallon of kerosene burned for around 45 hours of light and stored for decades without going bad. Unlike a flashlight, it threw warmth as well as light, enough to take the edge off a freezing room. Unlike a candle, you could carry it through a gale and it would not blow out. Preppers spend hundreds on solar lanterns that fail when the battery dies after 3 winters. A hurricane lantern from 1940 still works today if the wick is trimmed. That is the difference between a gadget and a tool. Number 23, the flint, steel, and charcloth tinderbox. Matches rot, lighters run dry, and the flint wears out. But a chunk of high-carbon steel struck against a sharp edge of flint has started fires for 400 years and will start them 400 years from now. The secret most people forgot is char cloth, scraps of cotton burned in a sealed tin until they turn black and catch a spark instantly. Your ancestors kept all 3 in a small brass box that fit in a coat pocket. A spark landed on the char cloth, which lit the tinder bundle, and the bundle lit the fire. The whole kit cost a few pennies and never expired. Modern preppers buy ferro rods, which are excellent, but they treat fire by spark as a stunt instead of a skill. The tinderbox was an everyday object. People made fire this way every single morning of their lives, and they never once worried about a dead battery in the cold. Number 22, the hand crank meat grinder. Bolted to the edge of a table, drop in tough cuts and trimmings, and turn the handle. That cast iron grinder that sat in your grandmother's pantry turned cheap, chewy meat into burger, sausage, and meatloaf that fed a family for a week. It cost about $2 in 1950 and weighed 5 pounds of solid iron that would outlast the house it lived in. Here is why it matters in a collapse. When refrigeration fails, a whole animal has to be processed fast and used completely. A grinder lets you turn scraps that would otherwise rot into preserved sausage and rendered fat. It needs no electricity, no fuel, and almost no maintenance beyond a wipe of oil. A modern electric grinder is dead weight the moment the power stops. The hand-crank version asks for nothing but a strong arm and gives you the ability to feed people from animals most folks would not know how to butcher. Number 21. The galvanized steel can. This one sounds too simple to matter until you understand what it actually does. A metal trash can with a tight-fitting metal lid lined with cardboard so nothing touches the bare walls is a homemade Faraday cage. Seal a hand-crank radio, a spare flashlight, and basic electronics inside, and a sudden electromagnetic pulse, the kind a solar flare or a high-altitude blast can produce, rolls right around the metal shell without frying what is inside. A can cost about $3 at the hardware store, and the principle was understood over a century ago. The military hardened entire bunkers this way. Most preppers obsess over solar panels and battery banks while leaving everything exposed to the one event that could erase all of it in a single second. Your grandfather did not call it a Faraday cage, he just knew that lightning runs around the outside of a metal shed and leaves the man inside untouched. Number 20. The wool point blanket. Cotton kills. When it gets wet, cotton pulls heat out of your body and holds the cold against your skin. Wool does the opposite. It keeps you warm even soaked through, which is why trappers, soldiers, and frontier families staked their lives on it for 300 years. The classic Hudson's Bay point blanket had small black lines woven into the edge, the points that told you its size and weight before you even unfolded it. One heavy wool blanket from the 1940s could keep a person alive through a night that would kill someone wrapped in a modern synthetic throw. It does not melt near a fire. It resists flame instead of catching it. It breathes, so you do not wake up clammy. A good wool blanket cost a few dollars and lasted 3 generations. In a long-term grid down winter, the family with real wool sleeps. The family with polyester fleece shivers and gets sick. Number 19, the pitcher pump. When the power dies, the water stops because almost every drop in a modern home arrives by electric pump. Your great-grandparents never had that problem. A cast-iron pitcher pump bolted over a shallow well brought clean water up from the ground with nothing but the muscle in your arm. You primed it with a cup of water to seal the leather seal, worked the handle a dozen times, and cold groundwater came pouring out of the spout. A pump cost about $4 in 1955 and could pull water from a well up to about 25 feet deep. There were no filters to replace, no motor to burn out, no monthly bill. Whole towns ran on these. A prepper can store 1,000 gallons of water in barrels, but barrels run out. A working hand pump over a good well is a water supply that never empties as long as your arm holds out. It is the single most overlooked piece of survival gear in America. First pattern break. Here is where the truth about prepping gets uncomfortable. The survival industry sells you the wrong thing on purpose. Walk into any prepper store and you will see a wall of gadgets, solar generators, satellite messengers, tactical multi-tools with 40 functions you will never use. Every one of them depends on something: a charge, a signal, a replacement part shipped from a factory 3,000 miles away. The people who actually survived hard times, the Dust Bowl, the Depression, 2 world wars, the great blizzards, did not own any of that. They owned things that depended on nothing but their own hands and a little knowledge. That is the secret the catalogs hide from you. The gear that keeps you alive in a true collapse is not the newest, most expensive thing on the shelf. It is the oldest, simplest, dumbest tool that cannot break, because there is nothing in it to break. Your great-grandparents were not less prepared than you. They were more prepared because their whole life was the drill. Number 18, the carbide lamp. Long before LED headlamps, miners and cavers wore a small brass lamp on their helmet that made its own light from rock and water. You dropped lumps of calcium carbide in the bottom chamber, dripped water on them from the top, and the chemical reaction produced acetylene gas that burned with a bright, steady flame for hours. A pound of carbide cost about a dime in 1930 and lit a lamp for an entire work shift. Here is what makes it brilliant for survival. Carbide is a dry, stable mineral that stores for years in a sealed tin and weighs almost nothing. There is no battery to die, no bulb to burn out, and the flame doubles as a way to start a fire or heat a small space. Cavers still trust them in places where a dead battery means dying in the dark. When the rechargeables fail and the spare batteries corrode in their package, the man with a carbide lamp and a tin of rock still has light. Number 17, the hay box cooker. This one feels like a magic trick, but it is pure physics, and it saved fuel in millions of homes during both world wars. You bring a pot of stew, beans, or rice to a hard boil on the fire for 10 minutes, then you bury the whole pot inside a wooden box, packed tight with hay, wool, or crumpled newspaper, and you close the lid. The insulation traps the heat so completely that the food keeps cooking for hours with no fire at all. A pot of dried beans put in at noon was tender and ready by supper, having used 1/10 of the fuel a stove would burn. Governments actually promoted these to ration coal and gas. For a prepper, fuel is the bottleneck. You can store all the food in the world, but cooking it eats wood, propane, and time. A hay box turns 10 minutes of fire into 4 hours of cooking. It costs nothing to build, and it works every single time. Number 16, the signal mirror. When the phones are dead and there is no way to call for help, a flash of sunlight can be seen from miles away, far farther than any shout or flashlight. A signal mirror is a polished metal or glass plate with a small sighting hole in the center. You catch the sun, aim the bright spot through the hole at a distant plane, boat, or ridgeline, and the flash carries for 10 miles or more on a clear day. Pilots in World War II carried them in their survival vests, and downed airmen were spotted by a single mirror when nothing else could reach a rescuer. It weighs almost nothing, never runs out of power, and works for 100 years. Preppers spend a fortune on emergency beacons that broadcast for 40 hours, then go silent. A mirror broadcasts for as long as the sun comes up. Heliograph stations once relayed military messages across hundreds of miles using nothing but mirrors and sunlight. The technology is ancient. It is also nearly perfect. Number 15, the cast iron Dutch oven. There is a reason this pot shows up in pioneer journals more than any other piece of cookware. A heavy cast iron pot with 3 short legs and a flat, rimmed lid could do everything a modern kitchen does over an open fire with no electricity. You set it in the coals, piled more coals on the flat lid, and it baked bread, roasted meat, simmered stew, and fried eggs, all in one vessel. The legs held it above the embers so the bottom would not scorch, and the rimmed lid held coals on top, so heat surrounded the food like an oven. A good Dutch oven cost about $3 in 1940 and is essentially immortal. Drop it, freeze it, leave it in the rain, and a quick scrub brings it back. In a collapse, your fancy nonstick pans flake and die within a year. A cast iron Dutch oven that fed settlers crossing the plains in 1850 still cooks dinner today. It is the one pot that does the job of a whole kitchen. Number 14, the sad iron. The name does not mean unhappy. Sad is an old word for solid, and that is exactly what this was. A solid block of iron with a handle that you heated on the stove and used to press clothes. Why does a prepper need an iron? Because in a long emergency, clean pressed clothing is not vanity, it is disease control. Heat kills lice, fleas, and the eggs they leave in seams, the same pest that spread typhus and killed more soldiers than bullets in some wars. A hot, sad iron ran along the seams of clothing and bedding, and it was a front-line weapon against infestation when there was no laundromat and no electricity. A pair of them cost about $1 in the early 1900s, and you swapped them as one cooled. They also doubled as a way to press a wound, dressing flat, warm a cold bed, or hammer a stubborn fastener. The forgotten lesson is that hygiene wins long emergencies, and a block of iron heated on a fire is hygiene that never breaks. Number 13, the hand-crank grain and coffee mill. A bag of whole wheat berries stores for 30 years. A bag of flour goes stale and bug-ridden in a year. That is the whole reason this little iron grinder mattered. Clamp it to the table, pour in wheat, corn, or coffee beans, turn the handle, and you grind exactly what you need, fresh, the moment you need it. A mill cost about $2 in 1950 and had nothing to wear out but a steel burr that lasted decades. For a prepper, this is the missing link in food storage. Everyone stockpiles flour and instant coffee and then watches it spoil. The smart move your great-grandparents understood was to store the raw grain and the bean, which keep almost forever, and grind on demand. A hand mill turns a 30-year stockpile of wheat berries into fresh bread every single day, with no power and no waste. Without it, your survival pantry has an expiration date. With it, your pantry outlives you. Second pattern break. Here is something the survival channels do not want to say out loud because it does not sell gear. The tool is only half of it. The other half is the skill, and the skill is the part nobody can buy. You can own a hand-crank grain mill and starve because you never learned to bake without a recipe card and an oven dial. You can own a Dutch oven and burn every meal because you never learned how coals behave. Every forgotten tool on this list came attached to forgotten knowledge, and the knowledge is what actually kept people alive. Your great-grandmother did not just own a pressure canner. She knew the exact moment the jar sealed by the sound of the lids popping in the cooling rack. She did not just own a wool blanket. She knew how to layer it so a child survived a fireless night. The gear is the easy part. You can buy all of it this afternoon. The hard part, the part that takes years, is becoming the kind of person who knows how to use it before the day you have to. Number 12, the pressure canner. Refrigeration is a modern miracle that disappears the instant the power does. For everyone before about 1950, food preservation was survival, and the pressure canner was the king of it. Unlike a simple water bath, a pressure canner reached the high temperatures needed to safely seal low-acid foods, meats, beans, and vegetables into jars that kept for years on a shelf with no cold storage at all. A garden harvest or a slaughtered hog could be locked into glass jars in an afternoon and eaten the following winter. A canner cost about $10 in 1955 and lasted a lifetime. Here is the prepper truth. Freeze-dried buckets run out and you cannot make more. A pressure canner lets you keep producing shelf-stable food indefinitely from whatever you grow, hunt, or trade. It is the difference between a stockpile that shrinks every day and a system that refills itself. The families that ate well through the Depression were canning families. They did not buy survival food, they made it. Number 11, the treadle sewing machine. When the stores are empty and nothing new is being made, clothing becomes something you repair, not replace. A foot-powered treadle sewing machine, pumped by a cast iron pedal, can sew a torn coat, patch a worn knee, or stitch a whole garment from cloth, all without a single watt of electricity. These machines cost about $20 in 1920, a real investment, which is exactly why they were built to last a century. Many still sew perfectly today. In a long collapse, the ability to keep clothing, tents, sails, and gear in repair is its own kind of wealth. A torn jacket in winter is dangerous. A blown-out boot seam can end a journey. The treadle machine let one person clothe and reclothe a whole family from bolts of fabric and scraps, year after year, with nothing but rhythm in their feet. Modern electric machines die with the grid. The treadle just keeps running as long as your foot keeps moving and the needle holds. Number 10. The whetstone and sharpening kit. A dull blade is not just useless, it is dangerous because it slips and forces you to push harder, and that is how serious wounds happen when there is no hospital to fix them. Your great-grandfather sharpened every knife, axe, and scythe he owned on a simple oil stone, a flat block of fine grit he kept by the back door. A good stone cost about $1 and lasted his entire life. He could put a shaving edge on a kitchen knife in 2 minutes, dress a wood axe so it bit clean, and hone a scythe sharp enough to cut grain. In a survival situation, every cutting tool you own depends on this one humble rock. Without it, your knives go dull in a week of hard use and become liabilities. Preppers buy a dozen blades and not one stone to maintain them. A man with a single good knife and a whetstone will outlast a man with 10 knives and no way to sharpen any of them. Number 9. The gravity-fed ceramic water filter. You can store water, but you cannot store enough of it. Sooner or later, you must make questionable water safe to drink, and the old answer was a tall stack of ceramic candles that needed no power, no pumping, and no electricity at all. You poured dirty water into the top chamber, and gravity pulled it down through fired ceramic elements riddled with pores too small for bacteria and parasites to pass. Clean water collected in the bottom chamber, ready to drink. The technology dates to the 1800s when these filters fought cholera in cities with foul water. A set of ceramic elements filters thousands of gallons before they need replacing, and they scrub clean with a brush. Compare that to the pump filters preppers carry, which clog, crack, and need constant new cartridges. A gravity filter just sits on the counter and works, day after day, turning pond water and rain into something that will not kill you. In a long emergency, that quiet ceramic tower is worth more than gold. Number 8. The entrenching tool. A folding shovel sounds boring until you understand how many lives it has saved. The military entrenching tool, the compact hinged spade soldiers carried since the First World War, was never just for digging. It dug latrines that kept disease away from camp, the single biggest killer in every long crisis. It dug a fire pit, a shelter, a cold storage hole, a grave. The flat blade chopped roots, pried and hammered, and in a pinch, defended its owner. A surplus e-tool cost a couple of dollars and folded down to fit on a belt. For a prepper, sanitation is the unglamorous thing that decides who stays healthy and who gets sick when the toilets stop flushing. Cholera and dysentery do not come from monsters. They come from waste in the wrong place. A simple folding shovel used to dig a proper latrine downhill and away from water has prevented more deaths than any weapon. It is the most useful tool almost nobody thinks to stock. Number 7. The wood-burning cook stove. 100 years ago, this cast-iron beast was the heart of every American home, and it did the work of 4 modern appliances at once. It cooked your food, baked your bread, heated your water, warmed your house, and dried your clothes, all from firewood you could gather for free. A good range cost around $25 in 1910 and ran for 50 years. There were no wires, no gas lines, and no failure point except the fire itself. When the grid goes down in deep winter, a home with electric heat becomes a freezer in hours. A home with a wood cook stove stays warm, fed, and dry indefinitely, as long as there are trees nearby. The flat iron top held pots at different heats. The oven baked, and a water reservoir on the side gave hot water without a heater. We tore these out of millions of homes to make room for appliances that all die the moment the power does. The families who kept theirs never once worried about a blackout. Third pattern break. Here is the thing nobody plans for because it is too big to imagine. Almost everything in your life runs on electricity, and not just the obvious things. Your water comes from electric pumps. Your heat is run by an electric blower, even if it burns gas. Your food is kept cold by it. Your money lives as numbers in it. Your gas station pumps need it, and the stores restock on trucks dispatched by it. Pull that one thread, and the entire modern world unravels in about 72 hours. That is not doomsday fantasy. That has happened in real blackouts, real ice storms, real disasters, again and again. The forgotten tools on this list share one quality the modern world abandoned. Not one of them needs the grid. That is the whole point. Prepping is not about hoarding more of what already depends on the system. It is about owning the handful of things that keep working after the system is gone. Your great-grandparents lived their entire lives off-grid and never thought of themselves as preppers. They just called it living. Number 6. The butter churn. Fat is survival. In a long emergency, the body burns through energy faster than most people realize, and rich, calorie-dense food is the difference between strength and slow starvation. A wooden or glass butter churn turned cream into butter in 20 minutes of cranking, giving a family a concentrated, shelf-stable fat that could be salted and kept for weeks without cold. A churn cost about $1 in the early 1900s and needed nothing but an arm and patience. The buttermilk left behind fed the next batch of biscuits or went straight into the pot. For a prepper with even a single dairy animal, the churn unlocks butter, and butter unlocks calories, flavor, and a way to preserve milk that would otherwise spoil in a day. The lost skill here is that food security is not just calories on a shelf. It is the ability to transform what you have into things that keep. A churn turns a perishable into a treasure. That is exactly the kind of quiet alchemy that kept farm families alive. Number 5. The smokehouse and salt crock. Before refrigerators, meat was preserved by two methods that have fed humanity for thousands of years: salt and smoke, and your great-grandparents mastered both. A simple smokehouse, sometimes just a barrel with a small fire pit, cured ham, bacon, and fish so thoroughly they hung in the rafters for a year without rotting. The salt crock, a heavy stoneware jar, packed meat and salt that pulled out every drop of moisture bacteria need to grow. A hog slaughtered in November became the family's protein clear through to spring. The cost was almost nothing: a barrel, some salt, a little hardwood for smoke. In a grid-down world, this is how you keep meat without a single watt of power. Modern preppers store canned meat and freeze-dried protein, and then have no way to handle a fresh animal when one becomes available. The ability to cure and smoke turns a deer, a hog, or a string of fish into months of food. It is preservation that needs nothing but knowledge, salt, and smoke. Number 4. The hand grain mill. This deserves its own entry, separate from the small coffee mill, because feeding a family takes more than a tabletop crank. A real grain mill, a heavy cast iron unit with large steel or stone burrs bolted to a bench, could turn a bucket of wheat or corn into flour fast enough to bake bread for an entire household every day. These were the difference between a community that ate and one that went hungry, which is why every settlement had a miller. A homestead mill cost about $10 in 1940, and it was built to grind for a lifetime. Here is the survival math nobody runs. A year's supply of whole grain for a family is cheap, compact, and stores for decades. But raw grain is not food until it is ground. Without a mill, that mountain of wheat is just birdseed. With one, it is bread, every single day, for as long as the grain holds out. The mill is the engine that turns stored survival into eaten survival. Number 3. The heirloom seed collection. Here is the tool that works when every gadget you own has turned to a brick. A jar of open-pollinated heirloom seeds is the only piece of survival gear that makes more of itself. Plant them, grow your food, and save the seed from the best plants to grow again next year, forever. The catch most preppers never learn is that the hybrid seeds sold in every store today do not breed true. Save them, plant them, and you get weak, useless plants or nothing at all. That is by design. Heirloom seeds, the kind your great-grandparents passed down in envelopes and coffee cans, come back true year after year, generation after generation. A handful of varieties, tomatoes, beans, squash, corn, greens, can feed a family indefinitely and never needs to be bought again. Stored cool and dry, seeds stay alive for years. Every other item on this list eventually wears out. Seeds renew themselves. In a true long-term collapse, the family with a living seed bank does not just survive the first winter, they survive every winter after it. Number 2, the root cellar. Before refrigeration, an entire harvest was kept fresh through the dead of winter in a hole in the ground, and it worked better than most people would believe. A root cellar was simply a cool, dark, humid space dug into a hillside or under the house, where the earth held a steady temperature near 40 degrees all year. Potatoes, carrots, apples, onions, cabbages, and squash stored down there stayed firm and edible for 4, 5, even 6 months. It cost nothing but the labor to dig it, and it ran on the temperature of the earth itself. No power, no fuel, no moving parts to break. For a prepper, this is the missing piece between growing food and surviving on it. You can raise a huge garden and watch it all rot in 3 weeks without cold storage. A root cellar stretches one harvest across an entire winter. The pioneers, the homesteaders, the farm families who outlasted every hard year all had one. We filled ours with concrete and bought refrigerators that die with the grid. Number 1, the hand-dug well. Everything on this list keeps you fed, warm, lit, and healthy. But none of it matters for more than 3 days without the one thing the human body cannot live without, and that is water. The most important survival tool ever built is not a gadget at all. It is a hole in the ground, dug or drilled down to the water table, lined with stone or pipe with a hand pump on top to bring it up. A good well gives clean water forever, with no grid, no bill, no delivery truck, and no expiration date. Your great-grandparents did not store water in barrels and pray it lasted. They put their home on top of a well, and the water was simply there every morning for their whole lives and their children's lives after them. You can stockpile 1,000 gallons and run dry in a month. A well never runs dry as long as the water table holds. Every other tool on this list buys you time. Water is the thing that time is for. It is the foundation everything else stands on. And it is the first thing most modern preppers forget. Here is my challenge. Pick one of these and add it to your home this month. Just one. The lantern, the grain mill, the jar of heirloom seeds. Then drop it in the comments so I know where you're starting. Because these were never just survival tools. They were a way of life, and the people who lived it never called themselves preppers. They were just ready. Now you can be too.